Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human transport ship as it approached the massive alien vessel. The ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built, stretching for miles in every direction like a floating city made of crystal and metal. Amy Carter stood beside him, checking her plasma rifle for the 10th time that morning. She was nervous, and Jake could not blame her. This was humanity's first real meeting with aliens, and nobody knew what to expect. The alien ship called itself the Eternal Harmony, and it belonged to something called the Galactic Council. Jake had been chosen to represent Earth because he was calm under pressure and good at talking to difficult people. Amy was there because she was the best soldier Earth had, and if things went wrong, she would keep them alive long enough to get back home. Behind them stood 6 other human soldiers, all carrying the standard weapons that Earth's military used for dangerous missions. Jake looked at his reflection in the ship's window and straightened his uniform. He was a simple man from Texas who had joined the space program because he wanted to see what was out there among the stars. Now he was about to meet beings from other worlds, and his hands were shaking just a little bit. Amy noticed and gave him a small smile that made him feel better. The transport ship docked with the alien vessel, and the airlock opened with a soft hiss. Jake took a deep breath and stepped through, followed by Amy and the rest of the human team. The corridor beyond was huge, with walls that seemed to glow with their own light. Strange symbols moved across the surfaces like living things, and the air smelled like flowers mixed with something metallic that Jake could not identify. They walked for what felt like hours through corridors filled with the most amazing things Jake had ever seen. There were pools of liquid that floated in the air without containers, plants that sang soft music when they passed by, and machines that looked more like art than technology. Everything was beautiful and strange, and Jake felt very small and very human in this place. Finally, they reached a massive room with a ceiling so high that Jake could not see the top. In the center of the room was a circle of beings that looked like they came from different planets entirely. One looked like it was made of living crystal, with light dancing inside its body. Another seemed to be made of gas or mist, constantly shifting and changing shape. A third looked like a giant insect with too many eyes and arms that moved in ways that made Jake feel sick to watch. The crystal being stepped forward and spoke in perfect English, though its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. It introduced itself as Ambassador Zexathul of the Vorthak Empire and explained that it spoke for the Galactic Council. The council was made up of 12 different alien races that worked together to keep peace in this part of the galaxy. They had been watching Earth for some time and were curious about these new beings called humans. Jake introduced himself and his team, explaining that they came in peace and hoped to learn about the galaxy and the other intelligent species that lived among the stars. He presented the gifts that Earth had sent, including samples of human art, music, and literature. The aliens examined these items with what seemed like polite interest, passing them around the circle and making soft sounds that Jake hoped were approving. Then Ambassador Zexthul asked to see human weapons and technology. Jake had expected this question and nodded to Amy, who began unpacking their military equipment. She laid out plasma rifles that could burn through steel, grenades that could level buildings, and a small device that could call down strikes from ships in orbit. Each weapon represented the best that human science and engineering could produce. The aliens gathered around the weapons, and Jake heard sounds that he slowly realized were laughter. The crystal being picked up one of the plasma rifles and examined. It like someone might look at a child's toy. It showed the weapon to the gas creature, which made a sound like wind whistling through leaves. The insect being clicked its mandibles in what Jake was starting to understand was alien amusement. Ambassador Zexathol spoke to the other aliens in a language that sounded like music mixed with static. Jake could not understand the words, but he could hear the tone, and it was not respectful. The other aliens responded with more of those laughing sounds, and Jake felt his face getting red with embarrassment and anger. Amy stepped closer to Jake and whispered that maybe they should ask what was so funny. Jake nodded and politely asked Ambassador Zexathol if there was something wrong with their weapons. The crystal being turned to face him, and its voice was kind but condescending, like an adult talking to a small child. The ambassador explained that human weapons were very interesting from a historical perspective. They reminded the aliens of the weapons that their own species had used thousands of years ago, when they were still young and had not learned better ways to fight wars. The plasma rifles were crude compared to weapons that could bend reality itself. The grenades were simple compared to devices that could make entire planets disappear. The orbital strike beacon was amusing compared to machines that could move stars from one place to another. Jake felt his heart sink as he realized that everything humanity thought was advanced and powerful was nothing more than primitive toys to these beings. Amy's hand moved slightly toward her weapon, but Jake caught her eye and shook his head. Getting angry would not help them here. Ambassador Zexthul continued explaining that the Galactic Council had been watching many young species like humanity, and they always went through the same stages of development. First came simple chemical weapons, then nuclear power, then basic energy weapons like the ones humans carried. Eventually, if a species survived long enough, they would learn to manipulate matter and energy in ways that humans could not yet imagine. The aliens offered humanity a place in the galaxy as a protected species. They would be given a small area of space to live in, and the Council would make sure that no harm came to them while they slowly learned to be more civilized. In return, humans would provide raw materials and simple manufactured goods to the more advanced species. It was a generous offer, the ambassador explained, because most young species were not given such protection. Jake listened to this offer and felt something cold settle in his stomach. These aliens saw humans the way humans might see a tribe of people who still used stone tools. They were being kind and generous, but they were also making it clear that humanity would never be their equals. Earth would become a reservation, and humans would become a curiosity for more advanced beings to study and protect. Jake looked at Amy and saw the same understanding in her eyes. She was a soldier, and soldiers understood power. These aliens had power that humans could not match, and they were using that power to put humanity in its place. The offer was not really an offer at all. It was a polite way of telling humans to accept their role as the least important species in the galaxy. Jake took a deep breath and gave Ambassador Zexthul his answer. He thanked the Council for their generous offer, but explained that humanity preferred to remain independent. Earth would continue to explore space and develop its own technology, and humans would make their own choices about their future. He said this with a smile and a respectful tone, but his words were clear. The aliens made those laughing sounds again, and Jake realized that they found his response adorable rather than concerning. To them, humanity was like a child saying it did not need help from adults. It was cute and harmless, and they were sure that humans would change their minds once they realized how big and dangerous the galaxy really was. As Jake and his team Prepared to leave, he heard Ambassador Zexthul speaking to another alien in their musical language. Jake did not understand the words, but Amy had been fitted with a universal translator, and she whispered the translation to him as they walked back to their ship. The ambassador was telling the other aliens that human weapons were adorably primitive and cute like a child's toys. The aliens all agreed that humanity was an amusing species that would eventually learn to accept guidance from their betters. They had seen it all before with other young races. Jake said nothing as they returned to their transport ship. But inside his mind, he was already composing the report he would send back to Earth. The aliens thought human weapons were cute. They thought humanity was harmless. They thought humans would eventually submit to being protected and controlled. Jake Morrison had spent his whole life dealing with people who underestimated others, and he knew that this kind of thinking was always dangerous. The aliens had made their first mistake about humanity, and Jake had a feeling it would not be their last. Admiral Kexavar stared at the tactical displays in disbelief as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by human weapons that his computers couldn't understand. The stellar dominance shuddered under repeated impacts from kinetic projectiles that passed through energy shields like they were made of air. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, but their advanced technology seemed helpless against the primitive human approach to warfare. Major Tony Rivera led his Marines through the corridors of the Dominion flagship with ruthless efficiency. The aliens had built their ship for energy-based combat, with defensive systems designed to stop plasma weapons and exotic particles. They had no answer for humans carrying what appeared to be simple chemical projectile weapons, but were actually sophisticated systems that fired programmable ammunition capable of penetrating any known armor. "Secure the bridge," Rivera ordered his team as they advanced through the alien vessel. The Dominion soldiers they encountered wore energy suits that should have protected them from any primitive weapon, but human ammunition was designed to exploit weaknesses that the aliens didn't know existed. Each round carried enough kinetic energy to punch through their defenses and deliver precisely calculated damage. The battle outside continued to turn against the Dominion forces. Captain Steve Murphy aboard the USS Vengeance had destroyed 6 enemy vessels without taking significant damage. His ship's armor, which looked like simple metal plating, was actually composed of materials that hadn't existed until recently. It absorbed energy weapons fire that should have vaporized any known substance and converted the heat into power for the ship's own weapon systems. Admiral Peter Cole watched the engagement from the bridge of the USS Constitution with satisfaction that he kept carefully hidden. 2 centuries of secret preparation were finally paying off. The Deep Vault Project had anticipated exactly this scenario. An enemy so advanced that they considered human technology laughably primitive, making them vulnerable to weapons they had forgotten how to fight. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the Dominion flagship is requesting surrender terms." Cole nodded grimly. "Put them through." The main display showed Admiral Kexavar's reptilian features twisted with confusion and defeat. His scales had shifted to colors that Cole's briefings had indicated meant fear and submission. Behind the alien admiral, human Marines could be seen securing his bridge while Dominion officers stood with their clawed hands raised in surrender. "Admiral Cole," Kexavar said, his voice carrying none of its previous arrogance, "we wish to discuss terms for ceasing hostilities." "The terms are simple," Cole replied. "Immediate withdrawal of all Dominion forces from human space, recognition of Earth's sovereignty over our territory, and an explanation to your superiors about why your supposedly superior technology was defeated by primitives using antique weapons." Kexvar's large eyes focused on Cole with something approaching respect. How did you do this? Our sensors still register your weapons as primitive kinetic systems. Your ships appear to be constructed from basic metals, yet you have destroyed the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. Cole allowed himself a small smile. Admiral, your mistake was assuming that primitive means ineffective. Humanity spent 2 centuries perfecting what you call outdated technology. While your people pursued energy weapons and exotic matter, we focused on making kinetic systems as deadly as possible. Captain Helen Foster aboard the USS Retribution coordinated the capture of 3 more Dominion vessels whose crews had surrendered rather than face destruction. Her boarding parties found alien soldiers who had thrown down their weapons in the face of human technology they couldn't comprehend. The proud warriors of the Galactic Dominion had been reduced to confused prisoners by mammals they had dismissed as barely intelligent animals. Dr. Rachel Stone monitored the battle from Earth's command center with amazement that grew with each passing minute. The sensor readings showed human ships absorbing direct hits from weapons that could destroy moons, then returning fire with projectiles that somehow penetrated defensive systems that bent the laws of physics. It was like watching cavemen defeat fighter jets using rocks and sticks, except the rocks were guided missiles and the sticks were precision-engineered weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Stone, President Johnson said from his position at the command table, I want a full technical analysis of how our weapons are penetrating their defenses. Stone consulted her displays and shook her head in wonder. Mr. President, the Dominion shields work by deflecting energy-based attacks into other dimensions, but kinetic weapons operate on basic Newtonian physics. Mass times velocity equals force, and force applied to the right point can break anything. Our projectiles are simply too fast and too precisely aimed for their defensive systems to handle. The battle reached its climax when the USS Constitution engaged the Dominion's remaining heavy units in what should have been a hopeless fight. The human ship was outnumbered 10-1 by vessels that individually outmassed it by significant margins. But Admiral Cole had trained for exactly this scenario, and his crew executed maneuvers that took advantage of humanity's unique approach to space combat. The Constitution's main battery fired a salvo that appeared to be simple kinetic rounds, but were actually complex weapon systems disguised as metal slugs. Each projectile carried sensors that analyzed the target during flight, guidance systems that adjusted trajectory for maximum effect, and warheads designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Dominion ship construction. The alien vessels tried to evade using their superior speed and maneuverability, but human targeting systems calculated their movements with accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. Every shot found its mark, and each hit caused damage far beyond what simple kinetic weapons should have been able to achieve. Lieutenant Commander Greg Adams coordinated the final assault from his position aboard the USS Liberty Bell. His ship worked with 5 other vessels to surround the last group of Dominion ships and demonstrate the true effectiveness of human-pack tactics. The aliens had built their fleet for individual combat between massive vessels, but humans fought like wolves, using coordination and mutual support to bring down enemies much larger than themselves. All Dominion vessels, Admiral Cole broadcast. Across the battlefield, you have seen what human weapons can do. Your choice is surrender or destruction. Choose quickly. The remaining alien ships powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. In less than 4 hours, the most advanced fleet in known space had been defeated by humans using technology that the Dominion considered museum pieces. The psychological impact on the alien crews was devastating as they realized that their entire understanding of warfare had been proven wrong. General Patricia Ross coordinated the aftermath of the battle from her command center on Earth. Human ships began the process of securing Dominion prisoners and analyzing captured technology, while diplomatic teams prepared for negotiations that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "General," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving messages from dozens of alien species throughout Dominion space. They're asking for assistance in liberation efforts against their own Dominion occupiers." Ross nodded with satisfaction. News of humanity's victory was spreading through the galaxy at light speed, carrying hope to enslaved populations who had thought the Dominion was invincible. The empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds was discovering that their technological supremacy had made them vulnerable to an approach to warfare they had forgotten existed. President Johnson addressed both Earth and the galaxy in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. Today, humanity proved that advancement doesn't always mean complexity. While others pursued exotic technologies, we perfected the fundamentals. We took the basic principles of kinetic warfare and engineered them to levels that our enemies never imagined possible. Dr. Kevin Walsh emerged from 2 centuries of secrecy to explain the Deep Vault project to a fascinated galaxy. His interviews revealed how humanity had anticipated exactly this scenario and prepared accordingly. The project had built weapons that looked primitive but incorporated engineering principles that pushed the boundaries of known science. The key insight, Walsh explained to alien scientists who hung on his every word, was that there's tremendous potential in so-called obsolete technology. Kinetic weapons, chemical propulsion, and physical armor can be perfected to extraordinary levels of effectiveness. We simply chose a different path of advancement than everyone else. Commander Lisa Baker, who had survived the destruction of Defense Platform 7, found herself promoted to Admiral and placed in charge of training programs for newly liberated alien species. Her job was teaching them how to adapt human kinetic warfare techniques to their own defensive needs. The Galactic Dominion, humbled by their defeat, agreed to peace terms that recognized human sovereignty and established protocols for coexistence with species that chose different technological paths. The empire that had once mocked human technology now studied it desperately, trying to understand how primitive kinetics had proven superior to their advanced energy systems. Admiral Cole took command of the new Galactic Liberation Fleet, a force composed. Admiral Kexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship Stellar Dominance as the Dominion fleet entered the solar system. 300 of the galaxy's most advanced warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy fields that bent space around them. The Admiral's scales had shifted to a confident blue color as he surveyed the tactical displays showing Earth's pathetic defenses. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting approximately 50 human vessels emerging from various hiding positions throughout the system. They appear to be using primitive chemical propulsion and basic metal construction." Kexvar's large eyes focused on the display with amusement. The human ships looked exactly like what he expected from such a backward species. They were blocky and angular, covered with what appeared to be simple armor plating. Weapon turrets jutted from their hulls at practical angles, giving them the appearance of floating fortresses from some primitive era of warfare. "Magnify the lead vessel," Kexvar ordered. The main display zoomed in on a human ship that had been broadcasting identification signals as the USS Constitution. It was massive by human standards, but tiny compared to Dominion vessels. Its hull was painted gray and showed the wear patterns of extensive use. Gun turrets lined its sides like the ancient warships that primitive species built when they first learned to travel between worlds. Their largest vessel is approximately one-tenth the size of a Dominion cruiser, the tactical officer continued. Sensors indicate basic kinetic weapons, chemical rockets, and what appears to be primitive nuclear propulsion. No evidence of energy shielding or exotic matter systems. Admiral Kexvar allowed himself a moment of contempt for the humans who thought such antique technology could challenge the might of the Galactic Dominion. Open a communication channel to their lead vessel. Let me speak with whoever commands this collection of scrap metal. The main display changed to show the bridge of the USS Constitution. An older human male in a simple military uniform looked back at him with steady eyes that showed no fear. Behind him, Kexvar could see other humans working at control stations that looked like they belonged in a museum. "I am Admiral Peter Cole of the Earth Defense Force," the human said calmly. "You are trespassing in sovereign human space." Kexvar's scales shifted to an amused yellow color. "Admiral Cole, I am Admiral Kexvar of the Galactic Dominion. Your sovereignty ended the moment our ships entered this system. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Cole replied. "Earth doesn't surrender to invaders." The communication ended, and the human fleet began moving toward the Dominion formation. Kexvar watched with growing amusement as the primitive vessels accelerated using chemical rockets that left visible exhaust trails. Their maximum speed was barely a fraction of what Dominion ships could achieve, and their maneuvering looked clumsy compared to the graceful movements of energy-powered craft. "All vessels," Kexvar broadcast to his fleet, "engage the human ships. Use this as a training exercise for our junior officers. Let them practice their targeting skills." The Dominion fleet opened fire first. Plasma beams and energy weapons lanced across space toward the approaching human vessels. The bolts struck the primitive ships and flared against their hulls in brilliant displays of light and heat. Kexvar expected to see the human vessels disintegrate under the assault. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships absorbed the hits and continued advancing. Their armor plating glowed red-hot from the energy impacts, but it held together. Sections that should have been vaporized showed only scorch marks and minor damage. "Tactical officer," Kexvar said with growing confusion, "what is the composition of their hull armor?" "Admiral, our sensors are having difficulty penetrating their surface layer. It appears to be some form of dense metal alloy, but the readings are inconsistent with known materials." Before Kexvar could respond, the human fleet returned fire. The USS Constitution's main turrets rotated with mechanical precision and fired what looked like simple kinetic rounds. To Dominion sensors, they registered as basic metal projectiles moving at high velocity. Nothing that should concern ships, protected by energy barriers that could deflect the radiation of entire stars. The first salvo of human fire struck the Dominion cruiser Void Hunter. The kinetic rounds passed through the ship's energy shields like they didn't exist and punched deep holes in its hull. Secondary explosions rippled along the vessel's length as the projectiles found critical systems and destroyed them with precisely calculated force. "Impossible," Kexvar breathed as he watched the Void Hunter list to one side, its engines failing and its hull breached in a dozen places. "Our shields should have stopped those primitive weapons." Captain Steve Murphy of the USS Vengeance demonstrated the true nature of human kinetic warfare when his ship engaged 3 Dominion destroyers simultaneously. His main battery fired what appeared to be a simple broadside, but each projectile was actually a sophisticated weapon system disguised as a metal slug. The rounds adjusted their trajectories in flight, compensated for the movement of their targets, and struck with accuracy that seemed impossible for such primitive technology. The Dominion destroyers died quickly. Their energy shields, designed to handle weapons that attacked with exotic particles and dimensional distortions, offered no protection against pure kinetic force delivered with inhuman precision. The human projectiles penetrated their hulls, destroyed their power systems, and left them drifting helplessly in space. Admiral Kexvar's scales had shifted to a dark red color that indicated alarm and confusion. How are they penetrating our defenses? Their weapons are thousands of years out of date. His science officer was frantically analyzing sensor data from the battle. Admiral, the human projectiles aren't just metal slugs. They appear to be composed of materials we don't recognize, and they're carrying some form of guidance system that allows them to adjust course during flight. Lieutenant Commander Greg Adams aboard the USS Liberty Bell coordinated a strike that demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of human tactics. His ship worked with 2 other vessels to surround a Dominion heavy cruiser, then opened fire with what the aliens thought were primitive chemical rockets. In reality, the missiles were sophisticated weapons that could penetrate energy shielding and deliver precisely calculated explosive force to maximize internal damage. The Dominion cruiser tried to maneuver away from the human attack, but its graceful energy-powered movement was too slow to escape weapons that calculated firing solutions thousands of times per second. The human missiles, struck from multiple angles simultaneously, overwhelmed the ship's defensive systems and reduced it to wreckage in seconds. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated itself. Dominion ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds found themselves helpless against an approach to warfare they had long abandoned. Their energy shields were useless against weapons that attacked with pure physics. Their sophisticated defensive systems couldn't track projectiles that moved too fast and changed course too often to be intercepted. Captain Helen Foster aboard the USS Retribution led a boarding action that showed the aliens just how wrong they had been about human capabilities. Her ship used magnetic grapples and physical docking systems to attach itself to the Dominion flagship like a parasite. Then her Marines, led by Major Tony Rivera, cut through the alien hull using tools that looked primitive but incorporated cutting technology that the Dominion had never encountered. The human boarding party wore powered armor that appeared to be simple metal suits with basic life support. In reality, the armor incorporated defensive systems and weapon technology that made each Marine more dangerous than entire squads of Dominion soldiers. Their weapons looked like chemical projectile guns, but they fired rounds that could penetrate any known armor and deliver devastating effects to organic targets. Admiral Kexvar watched in horror as his own flagship was invaded by primitive mammals using tools that his scientists claimed were obsolete. The human Marines moved through. President Carl Johnson sat in the emergency command bunker 3 miles beneath Washington as the final reports came in from the outer systems. Every human colony beyond Mars had fallen to the Dominion fleet. Earth's most advanced warships had been destroyed without managing to scratch the paint on a single alien vessel. The enemy was now gathering at the edge of the solar system, preparing for what everyone expected to be the final battle of the war. The president looked around the conference table at his remaining advisors. General Patricia Ross had dark circles under her eyes from weeks of coordinating hopeless defensive actions. Dr. Rachel Stone clutched a tablet filled with technical reports that offered no solutions to humanity's predicament. Secretary of Defense William Hayes spoke quietly into his communication device, coordinating the evacuation of civilians from major cities. "Mr. President," General Ross said, her voice heavy with exhaustion, "our remaining fleet elements are requesting permission to make a final stand at Mars. It won't change the outcome, but our people deserve the chance to go down fighting." Johnson nodded slowly, then stopped as his secure phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller identification showed a number he had never seen before, marked with security classifications that required presidential clearance to access. He answered the call with growing curiosity. "Mr. President, this is Dr. Kevin Walsh. I need to speak with you immediately about Project Deep Vault." Johnson frowned. In 4 years as president, he had never heard of any project by that name. "Dr. Walsh, I'm not familiar with that designation. What department are you with?" "Sir, I'm going to need you to authorize clearance level Omega-7 before we can continue this conversation. Please use the code phrase Midnight Sun with your security chief." The president looked at his security advisor, who was already typing on his encrypted terminal. After a few moments, the man's eyes widened with surprise. "Mr. President, the authorization is confirmed. Dr. Walsh has clearance to brief you on classified programs that predate your administration." 20 minutes later, Dr. Kevin Walsh arrived at the bunker accompanied by 2 people Johnson didn't recognize. Walsh was a thin man in his 60s with gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His companions were introduced as Colonel Tracy Phillips, a career military officer with expertise in advanced weapons systems, and Admiral Peter Cole, whose service record was completely classified. "Mr. President," Dr. Walsh began, "what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen carefully. For the past 200 years, humanity has been preparing for exactly this situation." Johnson leaned back in his chair. 200 years? Dr. Walsh, 200 years ago, we barely had radio technology." "That's correct, sir. But we had something else. We had people who understood that technological progress might not always move in the direction we expected." Walsh activated a holographic projector and filled the room with images of industrial facilities, weapons, and spacecraft. Project Deep Vault began in the early 21st century as a theoretical exercise. What if humanity's technology was someday considered primitive by an advanced enemy? How would we fight back? Colonel Phillips stepped forward and pointed to one of the holographic displays. The project's founders realized that while other civilizations might advance toward energy-based weapons and exotic technology, there was still tremendous potential in what they called legacy systems. Kinetic weapons, chemical propulsion, and physical armor might look primitive, but they could be perfected to devastating effect. Admiral Cole activated another set of images showing massive construction facilities hidden in asteroid belts and on remote moons. For 2 centuries, we've been building a secret fleet. Every breakthrough in materials science, computer technology, and engineering has been applied to making these obsolete systems as effective as possible. Johnson stared at the images in amazement. The ships looked like something from humanity's industrial past, all angles and armor plating and weapon turrets. But there was something about their design that suggested incredible sophistication hidden beneath the utilitarian appearance. These vessels were built to look primitive, Dr. Walsh explained. Their hulls are constructed from materials that didn't exist 50 years ago, but they're designed to appear like simple metal plating. Their weapons look like kinetic cannons from the 20th century, but they incorporate targeting systems and projectile technology that borders on science. "Fiction!" General Ross leaned forward with the first expression of hope Johnson had seen on her face in weeks. "How many ships are we talking about?" Admiral Cole smiled for the first time since entering the room. 47 major vessels, each one built to survive in combat environments that would destroy conventional spacecraft. 300 smaller craft designed for close combat and boarding actions, and weapon systems that I guarantee the Dominion has never encountered before. Dr. Stone looked up from her tablet where she had been taking notes frantically. But surely the aliens will detect them. Their sensors are far more advanced than anything we have. That's the beauty of the design, Colonel Phillips replied. These ships use technology that the Dominion considers so primitive that their sensors barely register it as worth noticing. To their instruments, our deep vault fleet looks like a collection of ancient relics held together with determination and hope. President Johnson felt a surge of something he hadn't experienced in months. Not quite confidence, but at least the possibility that humanity might have a chance. What's your tactical assessment, Admiral Cole? Sir, the Dominion fleet is powerful, but their strength comes from technology designed to fight enemies using similar systems. Energy weapons, exotic matter propulsion, dimensional shielding, their defenses are optimized to handle those threats. Cole's eyes gleamed with anticipation. They've never faced an opponent that perfected the art of throwing rocks really, really hard. The briefing continued for hours as the Deep Vault team revealed the full scope of their preparations. Hidden facilities throughout the solar system had been manufacturing weapons and supplies for decades. Underground bunkers contained stockpiles of ammunition designed specifically to penetrate energy shielding. Research stations disguised as mining operations had been developing new forms of kinetic warfare that pushed the boundaries of physics. The key insight, Dr. Walsh explained, was that advancement doesn't always mean moving toward more complex technology. Sometimes it means perfecting the fundamentals to an extraordinary degree. Our kinetic weapons don't fire simple metal slugs. They fire programmable projectiles that can adjust their trajectory in flight, penetrate defensive barriers, and deliver precisely calculated damage to specific target systems. Colonel Phillips showed them footage of test firings conducted in secret facilities far from Earth. The weapons looked deceptively simple, but their effects were devastating. Projectiles moved at velocities that approached significant fractions of light speed. Computer systems calculated firing solutions with accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. Defensive armor absorbed impacts that should have been impossible to survive. The Dominion's energy shields are designed to deflect or absorb energy-based attacks, Phillips continued. But kinetic weapons work on completely different principles. Mass times velocity equals force, and our weapons deliver that force with precision that the aliens have never encountered. Admiral Cole outlined the tactical plan they had developed. The Deep Vault fleet would remain hidden until the Dominion forces committed fully to attacking Earth. Then they would emerge from concealment and engage the enemy using weapons and tactics that the aliens had never seen before. We're not trying to match their technology, Cole explained. We're using an approach to warfare that they abandoned so long ago that they've forgotten how to defend against it. Their ships are optimized for energy combat. Our ships are built to survive and deliver kinetic destruction. President Johnson looked around the table at his advisors. General Ross was studying tactical displays with renewed interest. Dr. Stone was scribbling calculations on her tablet. Secretary Hayes was coordinating with communication centers to prepare contingency orders. Dr. Walsh, the president said finally, why wasn't I briefed on this project when I took office? Mr. President, Deep Vault was designed to remain secret until the moment it was needed. Too much knowledge in too many hands creates security risks. The project has been maintained by a small group of people who understood that humanity might someday face an enemy that considered our technology laughably primitive. Johnson nodded slowly. And you believe this fleet can actually defeat the Dominion? Admiral Cole's expression grew serious. Sir, I believe we can hurt them badly enough to make them reconsider their assessment of humanity. Whether that's enough to save Earth remains to be seen. The president stood and walked to the holographic display showing the hidden fleet. The ships looked ancient compared to the sleek alien vessels, but there was something reassuring about their solid, practical design. They looked like tools built by people who understood that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Admiral Cole, I'm authorizing activation of Project Deep Vault. Prepare your fleet for combat operations. As T. Commander Lisa Baker watched the sensor displays with growing horror as the first Dominion attack began. From her position aboard Orbital Defense Platform 7, she had a clear view of the outer colonies as they came under assault. The alien fleet had arrived without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space like a storm made of metal and energy. 6 months had passed since Captain Morrison returned from his meeting with the Galactic Dominion. Earth's governments had spent those months in heated debate about humanity's response to the alien ultimatum. Some leaders wanted to negotiate, hoping to find terms that would preserve human independence. Others called for military preparation, though few believed Earth's forces could stand against Dominion technology. The debates ended when long-range sensors detected the approaching alien fleet. General Zexthor commanded over 200 warships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in human space. They moved through the void with impossible grace, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that bent light around them. Lisa had been promoted to commander after volunteering for the dangerous assignment of monitoring the outer colonies. Defense Platform 7 was positioned near the mining world of New Pittsburgh, where 50,000 human colonists worked the asteroid fields. It was a peaceful place, far from Earth's political centers, where families had built new lives among the stars. The Dominion fleet approached New Pittsburgh without any attempt at communication. Their ships spread out in a formation that looked almost artistic in its precision. Lisa activated the emergency broadcast system and sent warnings to every human vessel and station in the system, but she knew there was little time for evacuation. The attack began with a display of power that took Lisa's breath away. The Dominion flagship, a vessel that stretched for miles through space, charged some kind of main weapon that made the stars dim by comparison. When it fired, a beam of pure energy lanced across space and struck New Pittsburgh's primary city. The settlement simply vanished, leaving behind only a crater of glass where 50,000 people had lived and worked. Lisa's communications officer, Lieutenant Greg Adams, tried to establish contact with the surviving mining stations. Most did not respond. The few that did sent desperate pleas for help before their signals cut off one by one. The Dominion fleet was systematically destroying every human presence in the system. A small group of human patrol ships tried to mount a defense. Lisa watched through her sensors as the USS Frontier and 3 escort vessels charged toward the alien fleet. Their nuclear missiles and kinetic weapons struck the Dominion ships without effect, absorbed by energy shields that flared briefly and then returned to normal. The return fire was devastating. Plasma bolts that burned hotter than the core of a star reached out and touched the human ships. They didn't explode so much as simply cease to exist. "Commander," Greg said, his voice shaking, "we're receiving a message from the Dominion fleet." Lisa nodded grimly. "Put it through." The main display showed the reptilian features of General Zexthor. His scales were a deep red color that seemed to pulse with each word he spoke. "Humans of this system, you have witnessed the price of resistance. Your colony has been cleansed as an example. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Lisa activated her own transmitter, knowing her words would be recorded and sent back to Earth. "This is Commander Lisa Baker of the Earth Defense Force. We will not surrender to invaders and murderers." Zexthor's large eyes focused on her image with what might have been amusement. "Your courage is admirable but pointless. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels. Your basic technology cannot match our capabilities. You fight with tools we discarded millennia ago." The communication ended, and the Dominion fleet began moving toward Defense Platform 7. Lisa ordered her crew to battle stations, though she knew their weapons would be as useless as those of the patrol ships. The platform carried humanity's most advanced defensive systems, but they had been designed to fight human enemies, not beings who controlled the fundamental forces of the universe. The battle was over in minutes. Lisa's kinetic cannon fired streams of metal projectiles at tremendous velocity, but they simply bounced off the alien shields like raindrops hitting a window. The platform's missile batteries launched their entire payload, nuclear warheads that could level cities, but the Dominion point defense systems destroyed them long before they reached their targets. When the aliens returned fire, Defense Platform 7 died quickly. The energy weapons cut through the station's armor like it was made of paper. Lisa had just enough time to transmit a final message to Earth before the command center was vaporized around her. The pattern repeated itself across human space over the following weeks. The Dominion war machine rolled forward without pause, conquering system after system with contemptuous ease. Earth's defense chief, General Patricia Ross, tried to coordinate resistance from her command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. But every strategy failed against the aliens' overwhelming technological advantage. Human fleets that had seemed powerful when fighting each other were revealed as toys when faced with real military force. The USS Defender, Earth's most advanced battleship, lasted less than 30 seconds against a single Dominion cruiser. The alien vessel's weapons punched through the human ship's armor, shields, and hull in one continuous beam that left nothing but glowing debris. President Carl Johnson watched the reports from his secure bunker beneath Washington. Each day brought news of another defeat, another colony lost, another group of human ships destroyed without managing to inflict any damage in return. The casualty reports made for grim reading. Hundreds of thousands of humans were dead or missing, and the alien fleet was still months away from the inner systems. The media across Dominion space treated the conquest as entertainment. Holographic broadcasts showed alien civilians laughing at footage of human warships trying to fight their advanced vessels. News anchors made jokes about human kinetic pebble throwers and their chemical rocket toys. The conquest of humanity was being presented as a comedy show for alien audiences. One particularly cruel broadcast showed a Dominion fighter pilot playing with a human patrol ship like a cat with a mouse. The alien vessel was small and fast, powered by engines that warped space around them. It danced around the human ship, dodging every shot while landing precise hits that gradually disabled its target. When the human vessel was helpless, the alien pilot finished it with a single energy bolt, then performed aerobatic maneuvers over the wreckage for the entertainment of viewers. General Ross received reports from intelligence operatives who had managed to intercept some of the alien communications. The Dominion military commanders were placing bets on how quickly they could finish the conquest. Most estimated that Earth itself would fall within days of their arrival in the solar system. Some thought the humans might surrender before any shots were fired. Admiral Kexvar, who had met with Captain Morrison months earlier, sent regular updates to his superiors about the progress of the campaign. His messages, decoded by human cryptographers, revealed the aliens' complete confidence in their victory. The humans fight with the desperation of cornered animals, one report stated, but their technology is so primitive that our weapons barely register their attacks. This conquest will serve as useful training for our junior officers. The psychological impact on human forces was devastating. Pilots who had trained for years to fly Earth's most advanced fighters found themselves helpless against alien technology that treated their best efforts as minor annoyances. Gunners who could hit targets from impossible distances watched their most powerful weapons bounce harmlessly off enemy shields. Military leaders who had spent decades studying warfare discovered that their knowledge was useless against opponents who had perfected combat techniques that humans had never imagined. Dr. Rachel Stone, Earth's chief technology advisor, worked frantically with teams of scientists to find some weakness in Dominion technology. They analyzed every sensor reading and weapon scan from the battles, looking for any sign that the aliens could be hurt or stopped. The results were consistently discouraging. The Dominion ships used energy sources that human science could barely detect, much less understand or counter. As the alien fleet approached the inner systems, including Mars and Earth itself, humanity faced the darkest period in its history. The species that had conquered disease, poverty, and the limitations of their birth world was about to be exterminated by beings who saw them as barely more intelligent than insects. Admiral Kexvar sent his final ultimatum to Earth when the Dominion fleet reached the edge of the solar system. His message was broadcast on every communication channel that humanity possessed. People of Earth, your military forces have been eliminated. Your colonies have been conquered. Your technology has proven worthless against the might of the Galactic Dominion. Surrender now and accept tributary status, or we will reduce your world to ash and find another species to serve in your place.